All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. So I'm really excited for today's event. It's going to be a really fun one. We've got classrooms joining us from across North America, classrooms in Canada, classrooms in the US, and we are having a Hearts in the Ice event. So Sunniva Sorby and her expedition partner, Hilde Strom, they have now been in Svalbard for over a month. They're living in the remote trappers cabin Bamsebu. In total, they're going to spend 9 months there, in the process becoming the first women to do so on their own. Along the way, they're taking part in all sorts of exciting citizen science projects, and each month we're able to connect with them for live events with classrooms, as well as different experts who they have joining in. So the theme of this month's event is climate change. And as many know, the poles are warming at a rate of 2 times faster than the rest of the planet. So there's pretty much a front row view where they are to some of the changes that are happening on our planet due to climate change. So Hilda and Sunniva, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited for this event.
Hi, everybody. We're super happy to be on the call, and thank you, Joe, for setting all of this up. And we'll hear more from the classrooms later, but for all of you on the call, thank you so much for participating.
All right, very cool. Well, it sounds like you had a little bit of an adventure today, making sure that you weren't going to be iced in. Can you tell us a little bit about how the last month has been?
Yeah, Hilde here. It has been a great month. We've had finally some minus degrees up here in the Arctic, and that gives us both joy and some challenges when it comes to the boat and all that. We are doing some citizen science projects, and we need our boat running. So, but that's all good. I came to Svalbard many years ago, and I have seen some really big changes in the climate, especially the last 10 years. When I came, it was a so-called Arctic desert. That means that we had less rain and less rain than in Sahara, actually. And but that changed with the rise of the temperature 10 years ago. We got more rain, we got more snow. The weather changed. We had when I came, it was no green, it was no grass anywhere. Now it's grass everywhere, and we had ice on the fjords and on the ocean. And now we have less ice on the fjords, and we have more ice on land due to rain during winters. So in 2015, we got more snow than I've ever seen on Svalbard, and a big avalanche just hours after that snowfall. We had a big avalanche that took away 12 of my neighbor houses, crushed them to pieces, and inside it was 17 people buried, and those were my closest neighbors. It missed my house for just 10 meters. And inside there, it actually died 2 people, a 2-year-old and a 43-year-old man. And for me, that was the first death caused by climate change on Svalbard. And it really made me very worried, scared, but also made me wanted to do something, to learn more about this and how we all can make a contribution to try to change this.
All right. And then, Sunniva, do you want to jump in and tell us a little bit about what led you to want to be involved in a project like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So for everyone out there, and I know we have Karen Elliott and some people from Squamish, my hometown, so shout out to all you. I left everything comfortable, everything known to me, and came up here and joined Hilde on this project, which we started 3 years ago, called Hearts in the Ice. And, you know, basically we're living in a time where technology and information are so abundant. We have access to so much information. And even though Hilde and I are the foundation or the nucleus of Hearts in the Ice, the two of us with our, 25 years of experience, myself in the Antarctic and Hilde up in the Arctic, we consider Hearts in the Ice a little bit of the nucleus, and around us are amazing humans and experts like Kim Holman, that all of you will hear from in a second, and other researchers and scientists that are studying climate change by looking at all sorts of things that I'll share in just a brief second. But basically, Hilde and I are everyday people like all of you that are listening. We've had maybe more experience in the field than all of you because we're just a little older, but we wanted to make our lives and our experiences in the natural world relevant to what's going on with climate change right now. So Hearts in the Ice is that nucleus, and around us we've surrounded ourselves with scientists that are studying climate change by looking at thermal imagery using drones, sea temperature and changes, the ice, the melting glaciers, specific cloud types, wildlife, marine mammals, impact of plastics, both airborne and those ingested by animals. So Hilde and I, through this project, we're able to take our 25 years of experience in the polar regions, connect with the scientists out there that have been studying this for decades, and create stories around this so that all of us understand what in the world we can do, because climate despair, which we'll probably talk about at some point, or a question that might come up, is a very, very real thing. And if it's like what happens to Hilde and I too, we get paralyzed by the doomsday news out there from the media. So we're trying to really spin the dial to the positive, and turn this conversation into one where every single person out there wants to participate out of a passionate interest and curiosity around what's happening. So I feel like it's a natural thing for me to be, I don't want to say stuck up here in the Arctic because it's a choice, but we are really remote. We're 140 kilometers from the nearest neighbor, and our closest neighbors are the polar bears. So that's my story.
All right. Well, very cool. I think it's time that we introduce Kim, because he's going to be able to tell us a little bit about the science that he works on. So we have Kim Holman joining us from a hotel room in Oslo, Norway. He's the international director of the Norwegian Polar Institute. He studies how climate interacts with things like the carbon cycle, and his field work has been over 30 years monitoring the climate in Svalbard, but he's also been on expeditions in Antarctica and Siberia. So Kim, I'm going to turn your microphone on. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Joe. I'm pleased to be here, and I'm enjoying a rainy day in Oslo.
All right. Well, Kim, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you and what it is that you study.
All right, thank you, and hi everyone out there. My name is Kim. I'll show you some slides and talk about it, but I'm a scientist. I'm 64 years old, and the first time I heard about climate change, it's something that people might think is a new thing, but the first time I heard about that man might be changing climate was when I was in 4th grade, a long, long time ago. So I hope that some of you out there might become interested in becoming a scientist from what we have to say today. And I'll start let's see, I will share. One moment, share. Share. Oh. All right, I will share some pictures about the Norwegian Polar Institute. We work from the North Pole to the South Pole, and I live actually in Svalbard, where Sunniva and Hilde are right now. But I live in a big village that has about 2,000 people. This picture here shows you where the islands are. Here is Scandinavia, here is Greenland, and of course Canada and Alaska out here. So you might recognize where we are. This perspective, this way of looking at the Arctic can tell you a few things about the Arctic. It's surrounded by land, it is an ocean, but it's also a place that is changing very much. We work in both poles, both in the north and the south, and you can see that in our logotype, which contains both the North Pole and the South Pole. But to the science, we study ice, and here are some of our scientists with our research vessel looking at what the ice is like. And you can see here they're drilling in the ice to learn how thick it is and how it melts in the sunlight. We study polar bears. Here is one of our helicopters trying to capture a polar bear in order to learn how it is doing with pollutants and climate change. And here is one of my scientists that is studying this young polar bear. We look at birds, how the birds are influenced by climate. When it gets warmer, the fish in the ocean, there are new fish in the ocean. So some of the birds, like these guillemots here, cannot capture their food anymore. And this is something that we work very much with. We also study how the sea ice is melting. This picture is from the Antarctica, but you see one of the scientists that swims under the ice to learn how the ice is melting from below. We get visitors when we work with snow, and we have dangerous things to do when we travel around. Here is a big hole that easily could swallow the whole tracked vehicle that you see on top. So it is a dangerous thing. We have to be careful, just like Hilde and Sunniva have to be careful every day. You might have heard, or you've certainly heard about midnight sun. We have total darkness in the winter, and here are some scientists working from a ship in the middle of the ice in the total darkness. The sun doesn't come up at all, and it's difficult to work. It's cold, it's dark, it's windy, and there are polar bears roaming around. But we have to study how the ice behaves also in the winter. And here is one of the female scientists at my institute. She is drilling an ice core. We can dig up old ice and study what climate was like when this ice was formed. So we drill in glaciers to learn about how climate was before. And we certainly keep an eye on the environment. The Norwegian Polar Institute keeps an eye on the environment. I want to show you this little animation. So the blue is cold, the yellow-orange is warm, and in the 1930s, the Arctic warmed up, but then it cooled off. And but if you pay attention now, the last 40 years, I think you get an impression that the entire planet has changed quite a lot. And if you look carefully here, the warmest place, the reddest place in this color is the Arctic, up where we are. So that is the place that is warming the most, and that is why we want to do science there. Here you see how the landscape is changing. You see the years up on top, 1922, 1939, 2002, 2010. And you can see this mountain where I'm pointing now 4 times here. And if you look in front of it, to the left of it, or to the right of it, or here in the foreground, you see that the glaciers everywhere are diminishing. And this is, this glacier here has, since this picture was taken in 2010, gone back by more than a kilometer, almost a mile back from where it was in 2010. So like Hilde and Sunniva and myself that live up there, we see it everywhere. So I hope you understand that it's an important place to understand what is happening in the Arctic. And I want to close this short discussion with this picture of a walrus that is resting on the ice, but it cannot do this anymore because in this place where this picture was taken, we do not have ice anymore because the ocean is warmer and it has to swim elsewhere. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have now. And with that, I'll stop sharing so that you can see me again.
All right, Kim, that was perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think you really showed some powerful images that really illustrate what's happening. And I love the pictures of the science in action, of the scientists drilling, studying the polar bears. I think that's really, it looks like an exciting, dynamic environment. And, you know, like you said, you can see these changes firsthand. So despite what, you know, students might hear in the media, there is overwhelming evidence that our planet is changing, it's warming, and that there are going to be consequences. There already are.
Indeed.
All right, excellent. Well, Hilde and Sunniva, I think you're still there on the phone line.
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Well, I think it's time we meet some of our classrooms and take some questions. What do you think?
Absolutely. Great. Please.
All right. Oh, I saw you guys for just a second. The video kind of, oh, I'm going to put you guys on the screen. We can see you. It was fleeting. Can you still hear me?
Wow, live from Bamsebu.
I can't believe you made it through the video.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm spotlighting you on. There we go. All right. Well, we caught a glimpse of you guys in the video. So sometimes the video does work from there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah.
All right. So any classrooms who are tuning in on YouTube, don't forget that you can still get in on the action. Use the chat sidebar and send us in some questions. Let us know where you're watching from. But I'm going to start picking some of our live classrooms to talk to. So our live classrooms, anything is fair game. You can ask Kim some questions about climate change. You can ask Hilde and Sunniva some questions about what it's been like living up in the trapper's cabin in Svalbard. So let's get this started. We're going to go to Mrs. Franz's group first. They're hanging out with us in Red Deer, Alberta. Let me turn their microphone on. There it is. How are we doing, Red Deer?
How are you going to fix climate change?
Oh, okay. Wow, that's a tough question. I don't know if you guys heard that, but they're wondering how can we fix climate change?
All right. right. Should I make a stab
Can
at
you
it?
repeat that?
Yeah, Kim's
Yeah,
going
please.
to take a stab at it, but how can we fix climate change is the question from Red Deer, Alberta.
Well, unfortunately, we cannot fix it immediately. What we already have done means that even if we stopped burning coal and oil today, climate will continue to change for 20 years more. So we are faced with having to adapt regardless of what we do. But of course, whatever we can do to decrease emissions is most important. To fix it with one can paint the planet white and it will get cold again. I don't think we want to do anything like that because it is very difficult to predict the outcome.
Okay, I think that's a really good point. Is we've done some damage already, and the sooner we can start, cutting our emissions, finding more greener sources of energy, the sooner we can start mitigating the problem. But as Kim says, the damage has already been done. It's going to take several years to kind of catch up. All right. Let us take another trip now. Let's go to Richmond, Vermont. We've got, looks like some grade 8s hanging out with Mrs. Kovalev. Let me get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, grade 8s? All right, nice big group of grade 8s. Who's got a question for us?
I do here.
Yep.
How does climate change affect the penguins' fishing habits?
Okay. Did you get that, Kim?
How does climate change affect penguins' fishing habits?
Yep.
Well, there are many different types of penguins, and each one has its own speciality. But they usually go for one fish type or one specific fish even. And when the ocean becomes warmer and the fish maybe aren't there anymore, then those penguins will be struggling because they have a hard time adapting to catching something new. They are maybe slow, but this is changing your food habits. Think of yourself changing drastically to become eating something else. It's not so easy. And so when the fish are moving out, many of these birds, penguins, but also in the Arctic, are struggling because their normal food is disappearing.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not easier to have to swim further and further to find your food, find different species moving into the area that you're used to. So lots of changes for those penguins to try and adapt to. All right, let's visit another classroom. So this time I'm going to introduce Miss Solid's grade 5, 6, Squamish, with their special guest, the mayor, Aaron Elliott. So let me just shift over and turn their microphone on. Let's see how they're doing. How we doing, Squamish? All right, great to see everybody joining us.
Okay, Thomas. All right.
What is the current temperature of the ocean where Sunniva and Hilde are?
Oh, that's a great question. So let me turn their microphone on. We just heard some hissing. That usually means the satellite's acting up, but let's see if they're still with us. Hey, Hilde and Sunniva, did you get that
Hello?
last question? Hi. So
Yeah,
I just,
hi there. The ocean.
yep, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. And hi, Squamish. Big shout out to my hometown. This is so cool. Right now, right now the water is starting to freeze around the shoreline where we are. So we have a really thin band of ice. So it's starting to freeze, but the ocean itself, the water itself is it's above zero. It's probably maybe a couple of degrees above zero. Hi guys, and it's 10 minus in the air temperature, and the sea is freezing around zero and maybe a little less than zero. So yeah, it's hard to say. We haven't last time we checked it was 2+, and maybe now it's maybe it's zero, maybe it's 1- even.
All right. So,
So times are changing. We're getting near the end of October. Yeah, and we're definitely seeing stuff starting to freeze up.
okay. So it sounds like it could be a good temperature for a polar bear dip.
We've had a few of those already, and without wetsuit booties, it would be a no-go.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Squamish, we're going to come back
We
your
just
way.
actually came back from. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. There's just a delay, so it's tricky sometimes.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just going to say that Hilde and I just came back from a boat trip, and we've been collecting saltwater samples and phytoplankton samples. So we've been doing that every week for Scripps Institute of Oceanography. So we have yet to put a little sample under the microscope to see what we caught today, but yeah, the ocean's definitely changing out there. We've got more species in the container that we collected than we did the week prior and the week prior to that. So maybe because of the cooling water, it's hard to say.
Can I say something?
Absolutely, Kim.
Yes.
I just want to point out that salt water, which they are traveling on, freezes a little bit below 0 centigrade or 32 Fahrenheit. -1, -1.5. Because of the salt, it doesn't freeze at 0. So it's probably a little bit below 0 when you start seeing ice.
All right. Very cool. Let's grab our next classroom. Let's go to Michigan this time. Mr. Hall's got some 5th graders in Canton, Michigan. Let me get their microphone on. How are we doing, Canton?
Great. Don't yell, you're hurting your ears.
All right, who's got a question?
Eric, go ahead.
I have a question for Kim. At what age did you start researching the Arctic?
Well, thank you for that question. I must say I was well into my research career when I started working with the Arctic. I had been in the Amazon, I had been in Siberia, I had been in the Sahara. But so I was almost 30 when I started, no, 27 when I started working with the Arctic proper. But I've been working with climate since I was 22.
All right. And I think, Kim, that's such a good point, is science and studying science, research can take you all over the world. So it really is an exciting career. You can learn a lot, discover a lot. And I bet Hilde and Sunniva would say the same thing, that a career in science can really open up a lot of doors for travel and exploration. All right. Let's jump in and meet another classroom. Let's go to Kingston, Ontario this time. We have the Social Justice Club with Mr. Candela, some grade 7 and 8 students. Let's get that microphone turned on. How are we doing, Social Justice Club?
Get closer so we can hear you. Emily,
Oh, I have to ask my question.
you have to ask your question, but you have to lower. Go lower. All right, loud and clear.
Why is the Arctic warming up and not other places?
All right.
Yeah, it sounds like she's wondering why it's warming up so fast compared to other places.
All right. The whole planet is warming, so the Arctic is warming, but almost everywhere else on the planet is warming. But the Arctic is warming more than any other place on the planet. And within the Arctic, Svalbard, where Sunniva and Hilde are, is the place that is warming the most. Now, if you have something white and the sunlight hits the white, the sunlight will bounce back out to universe and disappear from the planet. If you replace it with something dark, the light hits the dark surface and warms the surface and doesn't escape out to the universe. And in the Arctic, we are losing ice, we are losing snow. So instead of being a white surface, it is becoming a dark surface. So in the spring, when the sun comes back, it will see a dark surface instead of what used to be there, the white snow, the white ice. And therefore, the surface will warm even more. Probably in some of the areas where you live, Vermont, Ontario, almost all of Canada, the spring is earlier than it used to be. So also there, the snow melts earlier and the ground starts warming faster. And that is the main reason why the Arctic is warming faster than any other place. This is not happening so much in Antarctica. And the reason for that is that the Arctic is a little bit warmer than Antarctica. So there is much more area that is close to freezing in the Arctic. So when it gets a little bit warmer, a lot of snow melts. In Antarctica, it is -40. If it gets a little bit warmer, it is still very, very cold. So not so much snow is melting. But the main thing to remember is that white is replaced with dark, and that makes the sunlight warm the surface more.
All right, great question. And Kim, that was an awesome explanation. Thank you so much for that. We're gonna jump now to some grade 5, 6s hanging out in Cambridge, Ontario. Let's get their microphone turned on with Mrs. Gill. How are we doing, boys and girls?
Just tilt the camera. What is your main source of food and how do you get it? This one's for Hilde and Sunniva.
All right, good question.
Can you repeat that, Joe, please?
Yeah, they're wondering, what's your main source of food and how are you getting supplies out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we got here a month ago, we had more or less everything we needed and we need for the next coming 9 months, and that's canned food, it's dried food, and then we were able to we are allowed to hunt a little bit on Svalbard, so we have a little bit of reindeer meat, and we are going to fish during the winter. So We might have a shit coming in during December, but when we are looking out now and it's starting to shape out ice here, it might not happen. So we will be able to manage until next May. So the main source I would say is dry food and soups and also for now we have some eggs still that we turn around every week, and we try to keep the root vegetables that we still have, some potatoes and cabbage and carrots. So hopefully we will keep that for another month or so, maybe 2.
All right. Very cool. It sounds like, you still have a little bit of variety, but I imagine as the winter continues onwards that it's going to the variety will start to dwindle a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Mrs. Matthews.
I'll just add one quick thing to that equation on the food topic.
Go for it.
Hear me okay? Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the things here is the food that we brought with us. The other is how to hydrate it and how to cook. As you just heard, we're surrounded by salt water, and there's very little there's no fresh water around us that's not frozen right now. So we've had to also bring in really large containers with fresh water, and we're hoping we have enough fresh water to go with the food for the 9 months. And if not, we're going to do what we've been doing, and that's go and take an ice pick and saw away some chunks of fresh water at the base of the glacier or the icebergs that have floated in already at the shoreline. So it's a never-ending source of adventure here to eat and drink fresh water.
All right. We're going to go to Tweed, Ontario this time. We have, let's see, there it is. We've got Mrs. Matthews, 5'6", hanging out with us. Let me get their microphone turned on. There it is. How are we doing, Tweed? All right, looking good. Who's got a question for us?
What might happen if all the ice melts in the Arctic?
All right. Well, there are 2 types of ice. There is ice floating on the sea, and there is ice in glaciers on land. And the ice on the sea is important for the polar bear, for the ringed seal, and for many animals that are dependent on it for their life. The narwhal, the beluga. There are numbers of species that need the sea ice. And when the sea ice is gone, they will not have a home and they will lose their habitat. So that is, and of course, what I already talked about, that when the ocean is ice-free, that it will warm more, even more, is another thing. Now, for the glaciers, the ice on land, when that melts, sea level rises. And if Greenland would melt completely, the oceans would rise by 8 meters, which is a tremendous amount of change for many parts of the world. So those are the main, and there are, of course, many other things, but those are the main things to think about.
All right, great question, and thanks for that explanation, Kim. A lot of classrooms probably wouldn't realize that the sea ice is already floating on the water, so its kind of weight, its volume is already accounted for. But it's when that glacier runoff gets into the water that we start to get that sea level rise in 8 meters, so 24 feet for those in the U.S. That's a significant amount and will lead to millions and millions of climate refugees if that does happen. All right. Let's go to Mrs. Gerd Hare's class. They are joining us, grade 7s in Ontario. Let me get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, grade 7s?
Actually, our class left. They had to go on break. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. No worries. I know it's getting close to lunches for some classrooms. So
Yeah.
if they want to send us some questions, I can email them to Hilde and Sunniva.
Oh, I'm afraid they left already. So we had some questions, but I didn't keep. But
yeah, no worries.
Sorry.
Yeah. No big deal. Email me the questions and I'll send them to them later.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So I think we can squeeze one more group in. I want to go back to our group in Squamish. So let me turn their microphone back on. There it is. How we doing, BC? All right, let's grab another question.
We do have a lot more questions, so we'll email some through, but we've got somebody queued up right here.
How much has the temperature of the Arctic waters changed in the past 100 years?
All right, how much has the temperature of the Arctic waters changed in the past 100 years? We don't really have very good records that are that long, but for example, in Svalbard, where here in the European Arctic, the waters coming up in what is called the Gulf Stream have increased by 2 degrees the past 40 years. And of course, as you know, so the ocean temperature, air temperature changes very much, but ocean temperature changes slowly. 2 degrees does not sound like very much in 40 years, but for the past 15 years, that has meant that there is no ice or virtually no ice forming on the fjords anymore. So it is very close to zero, like Hilde and Sunniva were talking about, but a 2-degree warming is very big in the ocean. It means big changes. The air temperature has changed much more than that, but the question was on the ocean.
All right, so Hilde and Sunniva, time always flies when we do these events, but I wanted to turn the mic on and let you guys talk to the classrooms one more time before we log off for today.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. And Kim, thank you so much for joining the call today. And it was great to have you on board our farewell voyage in September. I just wanted to share something really quickly with all of you that are on the call that have joined from the classrooms east to west Canada and the U.S. And it has to do with science. I mean, Hilde and I we don't have a degree in science, but we have a real keen, passionate interest and curiosity around our natural world. We are both explorers, adventurers. We've both been guides. I've been, doing trips in the Antarctic. Hilde's been doing trips in the Arctic. And we live in a time, as I mentioned earlier, where we have all this technology and information and science and data available to us. So there's no time like right now, at least I don't feel, that where we all can participate. And it's a very simple thing. I mean, citizen science is perhaps a new word. It was at least new to me 4 years ago. And it really means that research benefits from every single, I'm going to call us ordinary, but we're all extraordinary people. All of us individuals collecting data for the scientists that are studying the changes out there. And then we build stories. And I think those stories sort of evaporate the boundaries, the geographical boundaries between, places in Africa or Asia or South America with the rainforest burning. There are no, we live in a world where we are kind of boundaryless now in terms of information. So I really love the fact that you're all on the phone call right now, and I hope that you find a way to really understand more of what's happening in your local neighborhood, your backyard, so that you feel like your voices matter, because they absolutely do. I think it's a very powerful time now as well for especially the youth of our world. You are, you're leading the front lines of a lot of the movements happening out there, and there's a good time for you to get into politics. There's a good time for you to get into, affecting policy change and engaging in the leadership in your community. So I think, we're just trying to do our part up here in our little Bamsebu cabin, but part of what we're trying to do is just really shine a light on all of you that are out there, participating in calls like this, and also wanting to pay it forward a little bit and do something that's relevant to where you're living. So thank you so much for everybody being on the call, and I'm going to pass this to Hilde for a final word.
Yeah, thank you so much, all of you. And we are adults, but we really need you kids out there. You are the one that's gonna inherit this world, and we know how precious it is. We love this earth, and we need you guys to engage and not to be too afraid. Just be aware of what's happening, and maybe be more thoughtful users. And engage, talk to your parents, your friends, and go out there and as Sunniva just said, explore your backyard and try to help us all to do better tomorrow. Thank you so much, all of you guys.
All right. Well, classrooms, thank you so much for joining us from Canada and the US today. Kim, thank you so much for joining us from Oslo. That was a great presentation. Thank you for bringing the science for us. And then, as always, Hilde and Sunniva, we look forward to our next connection from the cabin. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. And we look forward to connecting with you again later in the month.
And thank you, Joe. Yeah, and happy belated Thanksgiving to all the Canadians out there.
All right. So the last thing I'm going to do, classrooms, your microphone. Great job. You're always so good at that. Once again, Kim, thanks so much. Hilde, Sunniva, thank you for joining us, and good luck over the next few days.